Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is Dani Hoots. Dani's latest novel is Revenge. Dani, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. If someone hasn't yet heard about your new novel, Revenge, how would you describe the novel?
It's a sci-fi western, a lot like Firefly, but it's LGBT. It's about Ellie who wants to find out the truth what happened to her home because her entire nation was destroyed, and she thinks it had to do with her fiance. So she sets off with her best friend into the unknown and to find the truth.
And do you remember the original idea or impetus that led you to writing your novel, Revenge?
I was thinking about it, but I can't quite remember actually, because it was going to be a lot different and like more Western than sci-fi, but then it just kept changing, and I'm not quite sure the original inspiration.
Sure. And is that common for you when you're working on something to have an idea and have it go in a different direction than what you originally planned?
Sometimes it definitely depends the story. A lot of stories that I've been working on like have been in my head for years, and so they'll evolve a lot of the times.
Sure. Well, I note that in addition to Revenge, you've written several book series. Can you tell us about some of your other books and book series?
Yeah, I've written mostly YA, fantasy, and sci-fi. I have a Daughter of Hades series, which is based off Greek mythology. Wonderland Chronicles, that's based on Alice's Adventures of Wonderland. I also have the Essentially series, which is a sci-fi based on like a dream I had in high school. Or maybe not even high school, it might have been. No, it was high school. Then I have a couple of standalones based on mythology, and then I have my pen name, which is Lear Thorson, and that's more adult sci-fi, kind of romance, darker stuff. I just wanted a different name so people like saw it's not the same as my normal stuff.
Sure. Well, what was your writing journey that led you to writing your first novel?
So I technically finished my first novel while I was in high school, actually. I always loved stories. Grew up watching Star Wars constantly, Sailor Moon, and finished in high school. And that was actually the Quest, the Sunshine series, but I edited a lot during, in college. I didn't ever plan I'm still not just a writer, but to be mostly a writer, and that kind of evolved just when going through college, and I had some health issues. I'm like, no, the writing is what makes me happy, and so I focused on that a lot more. I got to take a lot of classes at ASU through their continuing education versus actual credited classes, and I got to classes with Michael Stackpole, Kevin J. Anderson, Timothy Zahn. It was really cool, being a Star Wars nerd, especially.
Sure. And how did those classes and those interactions with Timothy Zahn and Kevin J. Anderson and Michael Stackpole, how did that help you in your journey as a writer?
It definitely gave me confidence because, you get feedback, and there's a lot of stuff I need to fix, but also stuff they're like, well, you're really good at this. And I'm like, yay. But just learning from them and their journey was really helpful. And then still, I don't keep in contact constantly, but
Sure.
Still having that connection and getting to see them at conventions is a lot of fun. And then I'm also in a YA community here in Arizona, and that has helped me a lot this last year because they're very supportive. So I think finding just support in a community is really important.
That's great. Well, I know that you self-publish a number of your books. What led you to self-publishing, and how has that worked for you?
So I did start trying to find agents, and it's hard. And I definitely, when I was younger, which sounds weird when I'm not even 30, but when I was younger and pitching to agents, I know why I got rejected, and I've definitely built a lot, become a better writer, I guess I should say. But the reason I did self-publish was because I'm a total Capricorn, and if I worked on something, I'm not just going for me, and I don't care, like, I no judge on anyone who does put it just in a drawer, because like I did all that work and like I want to show it to the world no matter what. Like, so that's why I self-publish, just because I think it's important to, because of my work.
Sure.
Is that, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. So you mentioned earlier in passing about revenge being LGBTQ. Can you talk about that and you know, what was your decision process and you know, writing revenge?
Yeah. So when I write characters, they kind of just take a life of their own. Like I just start them and then they do their own thing, and I typically don't like tell them what to do. I don't know. I know some writers are like that too. So like when they're just like, "Oh, I'm bi," okay, like, and then that's how I wrote them. Like I didn't like go in and be like, "Okay, I want this type of character, this type of character." It just kind of happened.
Sure.
And I was happy because I like writing LGBT books. It's my first big one, but I have a lot like that are coming out in the next few years that are also LGBT.
That's great. Well, what's your writing process when you're working on a new novel? Do you write an extensive outline, or as you mentioned, do you just let your characters kind of speak to you and just kind of jump into the narrative? How does that work for you?
I usually, for my outlines, I do about like a 2-page outline with just like bullet points. But so it's really, really relaxed outline, and I know how it's going to end typically. But then like they'll definitely take over and become like their own thing. And like sometimes like, oh, I'll have to add a chapter here, take out a chapter there. For Revenge, was originally only 3 point of views, and now it's 4 because one of the characters became more alive, and he definitely like totally changed. So I had to like go and rewrite a lot. So I am a plantser.
Gotcha. Well, I know that in self-publishing that the book cover is very important, and I was really the cover for Revenge caught my eye. What is your process for that? Do you have the same designer? How do you work on your book covers?
I typically do use the same designer, but for Revenge, actually came across, who was it? Some authors were posting like their cover and their book, and I'm like, that's a beautiful art, and like I tracked it down and emailed her, and she was booked out quite a ways, and so like I was like, oh, I think it'd be really cool for this series. So I have all the books in the series already, but she just does the art, and so I actually went to my other artist for everything, and she did the format with the title, because I tried and I was like, no, I want this to look good. So and I really like how it turned out, especially the back cover. It looks really cool because it's like a zoom in with the main character for that book.
And who is the artist for Revenge?
Mona Finden. I think it's pronounced Finden.
Got it. And are you working on another novel now?
Yeah, I am working on book 2. That'll be out in February, so I need to really... Yay, Nanowrimo. I definitely can write faster if I have like competition, so those writing sprints help me a lot. But it's the outlines are done because for the artist, she's like, can you give me an outline of your book or like a summary? So I had to summarize the entire series. I'm like, okay, it's cool. I'm all ready to go for everything. And I think book 2, like, sequels are a lot easier for me to write because I know the character. Like, I'm not like discovering things and having to go back and change stuff. I mean, I do still have to change stuff, but like not as much as I would on the first draft of the first book, because okay, I can be in their heads really easily.
Well, you mentioned NaNoWriMo just a moment ago. Have you done NaNoWriMo before?
Yeah, a few times. I'm usually for COVID, how I'm coping is writing a lot. So I definitely have for the past 2 years written novel in November. And I saw one person was doing 4 novels, and that was just crazy.
Wow.
And they're all on track, and I'm like, wow.
Wow. And for those listening who may not know, NaNoWriMo is an acronym or short for National Novel Writing Month, which happens every November, and you can look it up online. So I just wanted to ask you, self-publishing changes quite often. As 2021 is drawing to a close, what advice would you have for someone who's listening who may be just starting their self-publishing journey?
Marketing. Take marketing classes. It's very, very important because typically traditional publishing has a big marketing team behind them, usually. And that, like, no one's gonna just discover your book. Maybe they will. Maybe. No, I'm not gonna say it's not a possibility, but when there's like a lot of books published every day, for self-publish and traditional, you kind of have to find your niche, which takes time because, as I was saying, I usually write fantasy, and this one's sci-fi, and I had to find a whole new niche, because my audience more liked mythology than sci-fi, so that's been fun. But like, definitely marketing and definitely finding your community. Don't just go in and ask for stuff, but like, develop relationships and find just that mutual wanting to help each other, not necessarily asking or expecting favors.
Right. Well, what writing advice in terms of writing the novels? What advice would you offer for those who are working on their own stories and novels?
This advice is by that Michael Stackpole actually told us, and I think Joseph Nassis was to just keep writing. Don't go back and edit. Just finish your book. You can't edit not finished work. So even if you're going to go back and change like a whole scene, just put a note and keep writing. And I definitely think that helped me a lot because it takes off the stress of thinking it needs to be perfect the first time. And yeah, definitely just finish the draft. And I think Stephen King does that, but I think he throws away the whole draft and then starts over, which is not something I would do.
Well, what novels have you read recently that you enjoyed and that
I
you
really
would recommend?
like Karen I think McManus is her last name. What was it called? She just got like a TV show on Peacock. One of Us is Lying. It's a YA dark academia thriller. I've been like having fun with those. They're really interesting. I really love Lindsay Ellie's I'm just blanking on names. Gunslinger Girl. Recent. I love stalking Jack the Ripper series, and I'm like in the middle of that. I can't think of who wrote that.
That's fun. Well, where can people find you online if they'd like to learn more about you and your novels and your various novel series? Hey, this is Jeff, the host of the Reading and Writing podcast. Thanks again for listening to the podcast. I have a company that I want to tell you about that I think you will definitely be interested in as a podcast listener. Family Sounds. Have you ever gone to a family reunion and traded stories and laughed with your relatives, and later you thought, gosh, I wish there was some way that we had a way to preserve those stories and preserve those memories when we're not face-to-face? Well, now you do with Family Sounds. Family Sounds can create an hour-long podcast that's just for you, that's just for your family, that tells the stories of your family and your relatives. And Family Sounds team, they're pros. They've done this before. They have lots of experience crafting stories for public broadcasting through radio and podcasts. They will use your family's voices as well as a professional narrator to tie the story together. Again, the name of the company is Family Sounds, And you can find them at family-sounds.com/books. Again, that is family-sounds.com/books. Family Sounds, your memories, your family in a podcast today. So check them out. family-sounds.com/books. Thanks for listening. Are you on a search for a special holiday or birthday gift for a reader in your life? A reader who loves history? Well, I've got a suggestion for you. How about giving them weekly historic letters in the mail from Letterjoy? Every week, they'll receive a letter from a famous historical figure or an eloquent eyewitness to a major event. Past Letterjoy letters have included famous defense attorneys, the United States and China, or working on the railroad, exploring the American history of the railroads. For example, one letter was an engineer writing home to his wife to describe the tough process of laying tracks for the Transcontinental Railroad. Every Letterjoy letter arrives at your door on fine stationery or parchment with a real stamp. And each letter also includes the postscript, an article by expert curators on the latest letter and the historical figures and events connected to it. Visit letterjoy.co to give weekly historic letters to the historian in your life. And I have a special offer for listeners of this podcast. Use promo code BOOKS at checkout to get $5 towards your first order. Again, that's letterjoy.co, promo code BOOKS, to give a special gift to the reader in your life.
I have a website, DaniHoots.com. I also am very active on Instagram, which is at DaniHootsAuthor. And I post, every other post is a mythology fact of the day. And then I also post reviews and cover reveals and stuff like that with fun cosplay and backgrounds. Canva is amazing, by the way. Speaking of marketing, just subscribe to Canva because they can do so much. It's really cool.
And can you describe what Canva is for those who may not know?
It's like you can make posts and stuff, especially the pictures for posts. It has one, what's it called? Templates already, or you can make your own, and you can actually take a picture. Like if you took a picture of yourself in front of something, you're like, I don't want that background. I want to make it kind of look like I did a Photoshop. You just click a button and it takes away the background, and I'm just enamored by the fact I can do this. And so that's what I've been doing, and matching the cover for the background. It's been fun.
That's great. Well, again, we've been speaking with Dani Hoots. Dani's latest novel is Revenge. The novel is available now, so go buy a copy. And Dani, thanks for doing this interview.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Now, stay tuned for a brief excerpt from the audiobook of Dani Hoots' novel Revenge, narrated by Valerie Rose Lohman, Ryan Hogan, Alex Lagace, and Ron Guan. Audio edited by Alex Kingsley. Available wherever audiobooks are sold.
Chapter 1. Ellie. It didn't used to be this way. I tapped my smoke on the ashtray, exhaling the herb-filled vapor. It was a delightful blend of local plants and made to order at the bar. This establishment seemed to have it all. Smokes, drinks, both alcoholic and not. Games, food, gambling. It was all here, meaning everyone in town occupied the small establishment at all hours of the day. Thank goodness all I could smell was my herbal smoke and the alcohol in my friend Zach's breath. I had a feeling the room smelled of sweat and wet fur. How many girly martinis are you going to drink tonight? I raised an eyebrow and flashed him a grin. Zach stared at me, his shimmering gold eyes unamused as he downed the rest of the fruity martini through his tiny straw. Why he always used them instead of drinking from the side of the glass, I did not understand. Perhaps it was so he'd feel he was pacing himself, even if we both knew that was a lie. Setting the glass down, Zach pulled loose strands of red hair back into his bun. I'll have you know these drinks taste a lot better than the straight alcohol you always drink. Aside, it's not straight alcohol. It's called whiskey. Tastes nasty is what it is. I smiled a little. Anyway, I should cut you off there. That's your third one. And our contact isn't even here yet. There isn't much alcohol in these. At least I taste none. Yeah, I have noticed you don't. But that doesn't mean there isn't any in it. We have gone over this. You're a year older than me. You should know better. He let out a breath of defeat. Oh yeah, a whole whopping year. But fine, I won't have another until the guy gets here. What's he look like again? He's a human, and honestly, I'm not sure we can trust him. But he's the only lead we've gotten so far. Glancing out at the crowded area, I noticed all the beings that were having a good time. On the planet, there were a total of 5 different races. 6, if one counted Pleiadians separate from humans. There were the Lyrans, who all appeared like a mix of a human and a wildcat. I spotted at least a dozen different groups that had Lyrans in here, and our bartender was one as well. That made sense, since we were in the Lyran zone. Then there were Syrians. There weren't too many of those here. Merfolk, who could change from being fish-like to human in a matter of seconds. Typically, the Lyrans and the Syrians didn't get along, just like cats and fish. But never say that to their face. They don't appreciate that. Then there were Silurians, who were lizard-like and cold-blooded, both physically and emotionally. There were a few in here as well, and I did my best not to make eye contact with any of them. Then, of course, there were the humans, which is what my kind appeared like as well, at least for the most part. I glanced around and found quite a few, as humans like to travel and settle among the different zones, and then create half-species, or half-humans. Typical humans. I sighed as I glanced around some more, seeing if I could spot my own race. As if that were going to happen. This was the new norm, I supposed. There weren't many of us Calcians left. Shapeshifters who almost all had been destroyed in the attack 3 years ago. The other races didn't like us, as we could turn into any creature or race we wanted. The only way to tell we were Calcians was with our shimmering gold eyes. Each zone used propaganda against our race, making it illegal for us to shift. And eventually, we were attacked. The problem was, our zone was heavily armored and shielded. Someone had to have given them the codes and told them how to get in. I fiddled with the wooden ring that hung from my neck. And that person was my ex, Cornelius Adams. Zach brought me back to the present. Not too many humans in these parts, though, so he might know something. Surprised he didn't want to meet in the quarter. That was fair. Humans typically stayed in the quarter, which was across town. It was where all the humans usually stayed. Then the beach was just on the other side of the city, and was full of shelters for the Syrians to live in. It had been so long since I'd gone out in the water for a swim. Taking a deep breath, I reminded myself what happened the last time I jumped in water, and how the Syrians tried to kill me for entering the area. They also didn't appreciate the fact I could turn into one of them. Live and learn, I supposed. At the time, I was only 13, so one would think they would be a little less aggressive about it. I thumbed my 5Z 742 revolver, which was named Crazy Jack. It made me feel a bit safer when around all of these distinct races. Well, what do we have here? I heard a crackly voice to my right say. I turned to find 3 Silurian men. They wore dark, scaly leather, made of the large lizard creatures called drakens they either used for meat, clothing, or rode, instead of horses, since horses couldn't hold up their weight. Only the Silurians could tame them, which I had a feeling had to do with the fact they appeared similar. The larger of the 3 Silurians was the one to talk. He was more than likely their leader, since they always went by who was largest. His eyes were almost at the side of his head, like a snake I wanted to shoot before it bit me. But in this crowd, I couldn't do that. I gripped my gun, but kept it in my holster. We weren't doing anything wrong, just enjoying some drinks. Go make trouble elsewhere. I turned and tried to ignore them. One Solarian grabbed my shoulder and turned me back around. I wondered if there would be a day where I could go to a bar without getting harassed. That prospect was looking bleak. "Don't you dare ignore me, you Calcian scum!" His tongue slithered in his mouth, leaving me disgusted. There was nothing pretty about Solarians. Why couldn't I ever get yelled at by something handsome? Zach stood up. "Hey, leave her alone." "Oh, don't worry. I wasn't going to forget about you." The Solarian nodded for another two to stand near Zach. Glancing around, I noticed that most eyes were on us now, and it didn't look like anyone was going to help. Typical. No one wanted to get involved if there were Solarians. "We have a client we're waiting for, so unless you have business with us, meaning you will pay for our bounty hunting services," I flashed my gun at the Solarian, "then it's best you leave us alone." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm only mirroring whatever your intent is, kind sir." The Solarian hissed, glancing around me as if looking for some kind of weakness. If he ever ran into the few Calcians who were left, my gut told me they usually backed down or groveled at his feet by now. I, however, was not one to grovel. I could see his long clawed hand reaching towards his leather belt, more than likely where he stored a weapon. Without a second thought, I pulled out my gun and shot him straight in the chest. I heard his two friends let out a screech and hiss. Pivoting, I shot the other two. And then all hell broke loose. For the record, I didn't use my actual bullets, but some tranks. The lizards were only asleep, not dead. Bullets, as in real bullets that could kill, screamed across the air now, raining down everywhere. I swear, any time a fight broke out, everyone wanted to join. Especially if it meant hurting a Calcian. Both Zach and I jumped to the other side of the bar. This wasn't the first time we'd been in this situation, and we knew exactly what to do. I checked my gun as I glanced over at him. "How many rounds of tranks do you have?" Tranks were accessible by most. Real bullets were more difficult to come by, especially for Calcians. Don't get me wrong, we had some, but we weren't going to use them for something like this. He checked his gun, which was the same model as mine, but was named Lucky Susan. Enough. I nodded and turned to the barkeep, an enormous Lyran man. He appeared like a lion with a large mane that was pretty well groomed for working at an establishment like this. He was reaching for the weapon that hung behind the bar, a large shotgun that would do a lot of damage. Barkeepers could protect their establishments, no questions asked. Had that rule been abused to do bad things? Many times. But the rules hadn't changed. Most never changed in this world. This would not end well. We had to stop it before it got out of hand. Well, more out of hand. And before it was all blamed on us. I held out 3 fingers. 2, then 1. Zach and I stood up and unloaded each of our guns with the tranks. We were used to this mess and had excellent aim. The tranks were immediate, and I watched as creature after creature fell to the ground. As my gun ran out of tranks, I knelt back down and reloaded. Peering over at the barkeep, I saw the horror on his face as he lifted the shotgun. I shot him in the chest and turned back around to help Zach. The barkeep hadn't realized we just had tranks and thought we had just killed all these men. When they all woke up, they would realize what had happened, and we would be long gone. The last Lyran dropped to the ground asleep, and I took a deep breath. I didn't feel comfortable putting my gun away just yet, and kept an eye out for any movement. After a couple of moments, I jumped over the bar with Zach right behind me. I surveyed the room. It didn't appear too many people had gotten injured by those with the real bullets that had been flying through the air. Most had taken cover and were hit by our tranks before they could get out of there. We saved most of them by knocking them all out, but no one would see it that way. I grabbed my smoke and left a few coins on the counter. I would not dine and dash. What happened here?" a voice said from the entrance. Both Zach and I aimed our guns straight at the man. He threw up his hands. Whoa, I'm not going to shoot." We slowly lowered our weapons. "Are you Elvira Ryder and Zachariah Richards?" I gave him a once-over. He was human, same in appearance as us Calcians, except he didn't have glowing yellow eyes. That is, when we hadn't transformed. Are you the informant? Indeed I am. The name is Byron Hill. He glanced around. Come with me. Let's go somewhere that's a bit more lively. Most aren't dead, just stunned. Well, you will be dead if they wake and you're still here. I have a hideout in the quarter. You won't be disturbed there. Mr. Blondie turned and led us out of the bar.